All right, so get this. What if I told you there was like this secret weapon out there, something that could boost your business's value by over 200%? And the best part is it's not some fancy software or, some marketing guru. It's your company culture.
Wow.
That's right. Today, we're doing a deep dive into this crazy connection between corporate culture and, cold, hard cash. And to help us out, we've got insights from Daryl Amy. He's the author of A Business Owner's Guide to Maximize Business Valuation. Now, Amy, he lays out these 4 value creation engines, and this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Revenue growth, process optimization, culture development, and strategic innovation. And he argues that each of these is directly linked to, you guessed it, culture.
Interesting.
So get ready, because we're going to explore how something as intangible as culture can actually lead to major financial gains.
It's funny. We always hear about culture in this touchy-feely way, like it's all about free snacks and ping pong tables and team building exercises. But what Daryl Amy does so well is he breaks down how culture actually impacts a company's bottom line.
For sure. And he starts with this revenue growth engine. He even calls culture a multiplier. And this statistic blew my mind. Companies with strong cultures grow 4 times faster than their competitors with weak cultures.
4 times.
4 times. That's insane. It makes you wonder, what is it about these strong cultures that supercharges growth like that?
Yeah, well, think about it. When your employees feel valued and connected to the company's mission, they're going to be more invested in their work, right? They're more likely to, go the extra mile, provide exceptional customer service, and come up with innovative ideas. And all of that leads to happy customers, increased sales, and ultimately faster growth.
It's like this chain reaction. A positive culture creates a ripple effect that touches every part of the business. And what's cool? There's actually a ton of research that backs this up. Deloitte found that highly engaged sales teams, and we can all agree that a strong culture plays a big part in that engagement, have a massive impact on revenue. And then there's Gallup's research, which shows a clear link between employee engagement and customer retention.
Makes sense.
It all comes back to culture.
Yeah, it's more than just engagement, though, right? A strong culture helps a company stand out from the crowd,
Right.
Deloitte also found that 82% of executives believe that culture is a key differentiator. And the Edelman Trust Barometer shows that consumers are more likely to do business with companies they see as having a strong ethical culture.
So you're not just attracting and retaining top talent, you're also attracting customers who believe in the same things you do. It's a powerful combination. Okay, so we've talked about how culture can supercharge revenue growth, but what about the second engine, process optimization? How in the world does culture play a role in making a business run more efficiently?
Well, you might be surprised to know that there's a direct link between a positive culture and things like, productivity and efficiency. Studies have shown that engaged employees are 12% more productive.
Wow.
And get this, companies with strong cultures see a 26% increase in teamwork efficiency across different departments.
26%.
That's huge.
I'll admit I was a little skeptical at first, but those numbers are pretty convincing. But how does this actually work in the real world? What does a culture that promotes efficiency actually look like?
Well, imagine a workplace where communication is open and honest.
Okay.
Where people feel good about sharing their ideas and collaborating across teams.
Yeah.
In that kind of environment, you're less likely to have bottlenecks or miscommunications or people doing the same work twice.
That's true.
And that streamlining of processes leads to cost savings and higher profits. It's like you're greasing the wheels of the whole machine.
Makes sense. It's not just about working harder, it's about working smarter.
I think.
And any business leader would love that. So let's move on to the culture development engine. This is where things get really interesting, especially in today's job market. We're talking about the war for talent.
Oh, yeah.
I read this stat that really made me think 35% of employees would actually leave their job for a company with a better culture, even if it meant taking a pay cut.
Wow.
That's how much culture matters to people these days.
It's a top priority for job seekers, especially for younger generations, They want to work for companies that align with their values. They want to feel a sense of purpose. And, they want to work for companies that put a premium on employee well-being.
Of course.
And let's not forget about how it affects retention. Strong cultures dramatically reduce turnover, which saves companies a ton of money on recruiting and training new employees.
Yeah, constantly having to replace people is a huge drain on resources, and it can really disrupt a company's momentum. It just makes sense to invest in creating a culture that makes people want to stay. Okay, so we've talked about revenue growth, process optimization, and attracting and keeping great employees. But what about innovation? where does culture fit into that? That's where this strategic innovation engine comes in, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear more about that.
This is where things get really cool. You see, innovation doesn't just happen out of nowhere. It needs an environment where people feel safe to take risks, experiment, and share their ideas without being afraid of judgment.
I've heard about this idea of psychological safety. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly. Google did this massive study called Project Aristotle, and they found that teams that had high levels of psychological safety were 50% more innovative.
54.
Think about that. These are the teams that are coming up with breakthroughs, disrupting industries, and creating the next big thing.
Wow. So if you want to be ahead of the game, you need a culture that supports that kind of creative thinking and risk-taking.
Yeah.
But how do you actually create that kind of environment?
It starts with leadership. Leaders need to be the example. They need to be open to new ideas and create a space where people feel comfortable speaking their minds.
Yeah.
It's also about encouraging a culture of continuous learning, where people are encouraged to try things out, fail quickly, and learn from their mistakes.
So it's not about having foosball tables and beanbag chairs. It's about creating a culture that really gives people the power to think differently and push the limits. Now, I know you mentioned that Daryl Amy uses a fictional case study in his book to show what happens when a company really transforms its culture. Can you walk us through that? I'd love to see how all of this plays out in a real-world example.
Yeah, sure. So let's say we have this mid-sized company. They're doing okay, bringing in about $10 million in revenue with a current valuation of $5 million. But they have an ambitious leadership team. They want to grow, and they think improving their company culture is the way to do it.
So they've got the vision. But how do they actually start? I mean, transforming a company's culture seems like a pretty massive undertaking.
Yeah, it's definitely not a quick fix. But Amy breaks it down into manageable steps. He says you should focus on a few key areas, like making internal communication better, setting up a strong employee recognition program, figuring out the company's core values, and offering opportunities for professional development.
So they're creating a more supportive and engaging work environment. But how does that actually make them more money?
Well, let's see what happens to our fictional company. Over 3 years, they put in a ton of effort to improve their culture. Let's say they managed to improve things by 50%. And remember, we're talking about measurable things here like employee engagement scores, retention rates, and how happy their customers are.
So their culture's getting better, but what about their profits?
The results are pretty awesome. In the first year, their revenue growth goes from a decent 10% to an impressive 15%. That means an extra $1.5 million in revenue.
That's a lot of money. And it's all because of a better culture.
Exactly. And that's not all. They also start saving around $240,000 thanks to increased productivity. Remember the stats we talked about earlier?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another $100,000 saved every year because they've managed to keep more of their employees from leaving.
It's like one good thing leads to another.
Yeah.
Improve the culture and everything else starts falling into place. But didn't you say they also launched a new product line? That must help their finances too, right?
Who got it? That new product line came about because their employees were more innovative, and it brought in another $500,000 in year one.
So by focusing on their culture, they not only made more money from their existing business, but they also found a whole new way to grow. That's amazing. But this is just the first year. What happens next?
The cool thing is that these improvements keep building on each other. In year two, they keep growing their revenue, saving more money, and their new product line becomes even more popular.
It's like they found their groove. They've created this cycle where a strong culture leads to a better business, which makes the culture even stronger, and so on.
That's the idea. And by year three, they've even moved into a new market, making even more money and becoming even more profitable. And the final result is that their valuation goes from $5 million to $15.4 million.
It's a huge jump.
It's a 208% increase.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. This isn't just some fluffy feel-good stuff. It's a real business strategy. But I have a question. This is all based on a made-up company, right? Are there actual businesses that have seen these kinds of results just by changing their culture?
Oh, yeah. There are tons of examples. Take a company like Zappos, for example. They're known for having an awesome company culture, and it's a big reason why they've been so successful. Their employees are super engaged, they hardly ever have anyone quit, and their customer service is legendary. And it all comes down to their commitment to creating a really positive and supportive work environment.
So this isn't just a theory, it actually works. But let's think about our listeners for a second. Not everyone's running a huge multi-million-dollar company.
Yeah.
How can they use these ideas if they have a smaller business, or even if they're just part of a team within a bigger organization?
That's a really good question. And the answer is these ideas can be used at any level. Whether you're a solopreneur, a small business owner, or even just someone who wants to make their team better, you can start by focusing on those same things we talked about before, like good communication recognition, shared values, and opportunities to learn and grow.
So it's like creating a mini culture, a little pocket of positivity and excellence that can then spread out to the rest of the company.
Exactly. And even small changes can have a ripple effect.
Now, I know we've been talking about the good stuff that happens when you have a great culture, but are there any downsides or things to watch out for? I mean, can you have too much of a good thing?
That's a great question. And it's important to remember that anything can be taken too far, even a good company culture. For example, if you're too focused on making sure everyone agrees on everything, it can actually stifle creativity and make it hard to make decisions.
I see.
Or if a company is too laid back, it might not have the structure and accountability it needs to reach its goals.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, a culture that supports people, but also challenges them to grow, a culture that encourages collaboration, but also lets individuals shine.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that culture isn't set in stone. It has to change as the company grows and the market changes. It's an ongoing process of looking at what's working, making adjustments, and refining things.
Which brings up another question. How do you actually measure whether your culture is making a difference? I mean, it seems like such an abstract thing.
Yeah.
How do you actually put numbers on it?
That's a really important question. And luckily, there are tools and frameworks out there that can help businesses measure how their culture is affecting their bottom line. One of the most popular ones is Daryl Amy's value creation engines, which we've been talking about today.
Right.
This framework gives you a structured way to see how your culture is impacting those four key areas: revenue growth, process optimization, culture development, and strategic innovation.
So it's not just about what feels right. It's about using data and analytics to track your progress and make smart decisions.
Exactly. And there are other ways to measure culture too, like employee engagement surveys, culture audits, and even fancy algorithms that can analyze how people communicate and how they're feeling within a company. The important thing is to choose the tools and measurements that make the most sense for your goals and situation.
And you mentioned earlier that Daryl Amy also co-hosts a podcast called Culture from the Heart. Can you tell us a bit more about that? What kind of stuff do they talk about on the podcast?
It's a great resource, especially for business leaders who are really serious about making culture a top priority. They cover a lot of different topics, like how to create a culture where people give each other feedback and hold each other accountable, and how to manage changes in culture when your company is growing or going through a transition.
That sounds like something anyone who's interested in this topic should check out.
Definitely. They also interview some amazing guests, like thought leaders and people who are out there creating positive and impactful workplaces.
All right, so we've talked about a lot today, from how a strong culture can actually help you make more money to the practical steps companies can take to make their culture better. But as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a little challenge. So imagine you had this magic wand and you could instantly make one thing better about your company's culture. What would it be and why?
Ooh, that's a really thought-provoking question. I think everyone listening should take a minute to really think about that. It gets to the core of what makes a workplace truly great, you know? Is it better communication, more recognition, stronger leadership? Once you figure out that one crucial thing, you can start planning how to make your business more positive, more engaging, and ultimately more valuable.
I love that. It's a perfect starting point. And it reminds me of something else Daryl Amy talks about. Building a strong culture isn't like reaching a finish line. It's more like a journey. It's an ongoing process that needs constant attention, kind of like taking care of a garden.
For sure. It's all about constantly checking in on your culture, seeing what needs improvement, and making changes as you go. You got to stay ahead of the game, anticipate challenges, and be ready to adapt to whatever your employees need.
So it's not about finding this perfect culture. It's about making sure your culture is always evolving and getting better. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, from the real financial benefits of a strong culture to the things companies can do to actually improve their culture. But let's take a step back and think about the main takeaways for our listeners. What are the big aha moments they should remember?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that culture is a real asset. It's not just a nice to have perk. It's about creating a workplace where people feel valued, respected, and like they can really contribute. And that leads to real results: more revenue, better efficiency, less turnover, and more innovation.
It's a win-win for everyone, employees, customers, and of course the company's profits. And it all starts with changing how we think about culture.
Absolutely. We got to get rid of this idea that culture is just this vague feel-good thing. It's actually something you can measure, and it's directly tied to how well a company does financially. Companies with strong cultures just perform better, it's a fact.
And we've seen that there are tools out there like Daryl Amy's value creating engines that can help businesses figure out how much their culture is actually worth. But even with the right tools, building a strong culture isn't something you do once and then forget about it. It takes ongoing attention, a willingness to change, and a commitment to always making things better.
You got it. And here's something else that's super important. Culture starts at the top. Leaders set the tone and create the environment that either makes a positive culture possible or kills it. It's about leading by example and actually living the values you want to see in your company.
So if you're a business leader listening to this, I challenge you to take a good look at your company culture. Ask yourself, what can you do today to start building a more positive, more engaging, and ultimately more successful business? Maybe start with that magic wand question.
That's a great idea. And remember, building a great culture isn't just about creating a nice place to work. It's about creating a successful business that's built to last.
I completely agree. Well, we've covered so much in this deep dive into corporate culture.
It's been a great conversation.
We hope this has given you a fresh perspective on just how powerful culture can be.
And we hope you've gotten some ideas and inspiration to unlock the amazing potential within your own organization.
If you're interested in learning more about this topic, we highly recommend checking out Daryl Amy's book, A Business Owner's Guide to Maximize Business Valuation. And don't forget his podcast, Culture from the Heart.
It's a great listen.
And as always, we encourage you to keep learning, keep growing, and keep questioning what you think makes a business truly successful.
That's the key.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll be back next time with another exciting deep dive into a topic that matters. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep building those incredible company cultures.